So I have this text file with a list of stuff that I want to talk about. And it's kind of just going to be like a brain dump. This is not very structured. I feel like I came up with sort of a narrative arc, but it's not very cohesive. Okay, so a bit of background. So Brian and I have been working on lots of projects together. I had a nice job and then he convinced me to quit it to work on this software, which has so many problems that I've encountered and I needed to fix. And it's been kind of a nightmare, but also kind of awesome. I think my favorite part, honestly, although like it's blockchain and crypto, has been just making it from bad software into good software, like fixing bugs, ironing out the kinks. And I think the most interesting type of work in that category is like performance improvements, at least for me. So I might take you up on that Oculus Quest offer, but I also might not. But basically when I came to work on this project were several performance issues that were honestly like egregious. So let's talk about the first performance issue that I fixed. Basically, Dark Forest is a game about planets, and it's like a ginormous universe. And you can see like I'm mining here, right? And I can zoom in and there's more planets that pop in. And then I can zoom in further and more planets pop in. And then I zoom in further and more planets pop in. So these are the level 0 planets. And there's like a fuck ton of them. There's like a trillion bazillion of them. So let me open this diagnostics pane actually. I don't know if you can see that, but essentially, I think in general, when you're doing performance work, you should start by measuring stuff rather than by like actually doing anything performance related. So I had a little bit of fun creating this diagnostics pane, like a little system that allows any component of the application to like push whatever it wants to it. So like, for example, the renderer pushes stuff into here. You can see the amount of total planets is just growing at a ridiculously rapid pace. Another part of this diagnostics pane is the networking one. So you can see that I have made 1,006 requests to the blockchain, asking the blockchain, what is the state of this or that? Now, there's more, keeps climbing up. So I want you to pay attention to, I wonder if I zoom in, yeah, a couple of the numbers here. So compare visible chunks to total chunks and also visible planets to total planets. And I want you to compare them as I zoom and pan. So for example, when I'm zoomed all the way in, four visible planets. And if I keep zooming out, the amount of visible planets increases. But sometimes you actually notice that if I zoom out, suddenly the amount of visible planets decreases, which is pretty freaking neat. So that brings me to precisely what the first performance improvement is that I think is really cool, which is that previously, in order to render this game, the rendering code was implemented as follows. For each planet, draw a planet. Inside of the draw planet function, if planet is too small, don't draw it, which leads to the issue of there being too many draw calls in general. Just like an obscene amount of function calls. In actual rounds, this total planets number, I think, can get up into the millions. So previously, this far zoomed out view literally played at 2 FPS. So the performance improvement was basically turning that for loop into a lookup into a data structure. The data structure is like pretty interesting. It's one level cooler than a quad tree, which is like the solution you would first think of. Basically, there's a quad tree per planet level. So whenever I zoom in, the game calculates what is the minimum possible planet that I could see, minimal planet level. We're very lucky that all of the size of the planet is like a pure function of the planet level. If planets in the same level possibly had different sizes, this would be a much more annoying problem. But like all level zeros have a radius of X, all level ones have a radius of Y, etc. So the game figures out what is the minimum possible planet that I can render, and then it only looks in the quad trees that contain the levels of the planets that I want to render. So for example, at this zoom level, I am well, okay, let's say at this zoom level, like level 0 planets are definitely not visible. So I am just not going to even the renderer to them, to the renderer, the level 0 planets don't exist at this point. It's iterating only over the planets that are visible. So there's only 121 of them, and that makes it pretty fast.
I mean, a side note is at the top end of Dark Horse Play, before I even did this, the way that people like plugin authors and stuff would just go into the data structure that stores planets and just delete level 0s and level 1s and stuff from their data store. And so because he's not iterating them, you basically don't need to iterate and delete them now. There is actually still a reason to delete them because I believe if there's void work to it, they still end, right? Like always.
Not sure, but that's something I should look into.
So if people are sending tons of voyages to level 0s, those are still categories. Yeah, but now you don't have to delete planets. Hooray!
Yeah, and look at this. The number is like 60 FPS, except for occasional dips to a smaller number. That happens because every second we update every single planet that's visible on the screen. So every second there is a frame that just takes much longer than all the other frames.
What is updating?
Update the amount of energy, etc. Like if there has been a voyage that arrived, apply it, things like that.
Okay, question I have, why does total chunks sometimes go down?
That's another very good question. So I have made a very...
Can you repeat the questions also for the recording?
Yeah, so the question is why, so visible planets sometimes go down when I zoom in and out. Why do visible chunks or even total chunks, why does the amount of chunks go down? So the reason for that actually brings me to the second performance improvement that also dramatically increased the speed at which this game can render, especially like when the universe is really large. So I'm going to click a magic button that's called Draw Chunk Borders, and this button is very sexy. But what this basically shows you is that we tile the map, and each tile contains all of the planets, and the way we store the map both in memory, no, the way we store the map in local storage is in these chunks. And the way that we render these chunks is we iterate over every single chunk and we draw like a texture with a shader on it. And previously, the maximum size of a chunk, I don't actually remember the number, but it was some small power of 2, either like 16 or 32. So maybe if I go over here, actually, it's not even going to be possible to show you that small of a chunk because this is a debug build in which the min chunk size is 256. But anyway, to answer your question of why do the amount of chunks actually go down, if I turn on this miner, you will see some magic occur. It is rechunking and combining chunks that are at the correct places in the world. If there are 4 chunks that are equal size, it combines them.
Where are chunks for? Is there enough rendering planets in pulling, right?
No, they are for rendering the background. So one thing that isn't very visible in this universe is that the background of the universe can contain many different regions. There's like dead space, which is red. There's nebula, which is blue. And previously, the way we were rendering the background is every single chunk would store basically the space type that it is. And when we would draw the background, we would iterate over like a million trillion of these little squares and yeah, and shade in the square color. So first of all, that sucks because we can't have big chunks. If we have big chunks, then the background rendering is inaccurate because we combine small chunks into big chunks and then their color becomes like the average. So like edges just become completely aliased. It really sucks. So the reason we were able to start making these chunks bigger actually is that we have a new shader which renders the background in a smooth way. So the Perlin now lives both in the snark and it lives in the TypeScript and it lives in WebGL shader. So it's just like been re-implemented 3 times, but as a result, we get this like very fast rendering. Okay. Well, one thing that we need to be able to do is render only the parts of the world that you've mined. So there, you have to like keep track of that information somehow. One solution to this is you can keep some sort of like hole that describes using like points and line segments what you've mined, but like we already had chunks, so we just decided to stick with chunks and make them bigger. So that,
Go ahead.
cool. That is the second performance improvement. In addition to having this diagnostics pane, I've just been thinking about ways to level up like visibility and understanding into how this application works. So one thing that you can do like in any web browser is you can open this performance tab, you can start recording performance, and then it'll tell you like, what is the FPS? Like it goes down and it really, this is what happens. Sometimes it like is buggy and it doesn't actually show you like the flame charts. Okay. So all this stuff, like this tells you, you can see the periodic nature of the way that our application runs. So every single frame we're like drawing, we're like figuring out which planets are visible, which used to be like the majority of each frame actually for really large universes. So that's like one way to gain visibility. But another way that I've been thinking about recently is I want to start collecting metrics from players. So this build of the game on Dark Forest Online, actually every 10 seconds, I'm uploading the data structure that represents this diagnostics pane. And so I can actually like run a query and you can see what the average like FPS is at any given point, for example, or like the amount of visible planets I have. So you can see it's 212 over here. If I go back over here, you can see 212. And then if I like zoom in, there will be 41 visible planets. I can rerun this query maybe a couple times. 41, boom. It's chunky, but that's something I have to fix.
Is it average over the users?
Yeah, so this is like a data aggregation tool. You send it objects and then you can write queries. Yeah.
You have the non-aggregated data, like
Yep, you can click raw data right here. Check it out.
How many planets I have?
Yes,
How many I can see.
yes.
There's an opt-out.
Yeah.
However, if you opt out, your use case will not be optimized for. In fact, I will optimize against your use case and make performance worse.
I just won't tell you my use case.
I'll know it's you, Blaine. I'll know.
I just think it means like, it means like if I were to hack you, does that mean I could have some superpower over the universe and like potentially use this information like in the game? By like using this data about like performance and this computer.
I really doubt that.
Yeah.
This brings me to several other pieces of information that I'm collecting. So mostly this is a reaction to like bugs that we've had. So for example, I'm collecting the balance of the whitelist contract address. This is something you guys don't have to deal with, which is smart, but I have to deal with it. Oh, so the issue is like fucking sometimes
Quite often.
it just runs out of money. And because it's like, it's unclear whose responsibility is to keep it full and like keep track of this shit. I don't know, like for example, we launched the last round 2, and like I come back and at like 2 in the morning from a party and I just check the game and like boom, it's fucking broken. Like you can't register. We just released it, so this is like the perfect time for it to be broken. Honestly, it was horrible. I spent like 3 hours debugging it, and because of the fucking like transactions not actually returning you, it was really annoying. Anyway, so I said never again, and I started collecting stuff like, for example, another interesting thing I'm collecting right now is the XDAI gas prices, slow, average, fast. And I think I started collecting this post the most recent round, and I want to see like what impact we actually make on the market of gas on XDAI. Because when there's lots of players, the gas price goes up, and sometimes people actually can't even play the game because it's too expensive. I think this is like an interesting thing to figure out. Transactions, I think this board's pretty cool. Basically, it's just very opaque. It's like an opaque system, XDAI, into the blockchain. I don't really, when I first started working on this project, I like didn't understand what the fuck, but at the end of the day, everything is just somebody else's computer, and like you can measure stuff like, okay, how long do transactions take? So you can see like, I'm grouping by type of transaction here. So the average move on XDAI right now it takes 21 seconds. And this is interesting information. Like I can, based on this information, start thinking about like, how do we make the game different? Like, how do we maybe give more feedback during the confirmation wait period, or like stuff like that. Haven't gotten to translating this data into actual outcomes yet. And I actually don't really know if I ever will, but at the very least, it's interesting to look at.
Question.
Yes,
This includes proving the snark, right?
no.
Well, why is the init transaction 5x big, like takes 5x more time than a move transaction then?
Oh, I mean, the snark proving in the contract side, it takes into account maybe, I don't know.
But that should still be less than 1 second. So this is kind of interesting. It's an interesting piece of stats.
It is interesting, yeah. Maybe you can dig into it,
Yeah.
see what you find.
All right. I just thought, okay, so it doesn't include, it's like literally it starts measuring when the thing has been submitted to a node.
Yes,
Okay, okay.
correct. Yeah, so that's that. Let's see, what else do I have? Chunks, monitoring, blah, blah, blah. Okay, one problem that we've been, or I've been dealing with in the game is like, we just have a fuck ton of panes. So I don't know how many of you guys played Dark Forest in the previous rounds, but like one major issue, especially if you have a very small screen, is like you open this pane, you open this pane, you open this pane, very quickly, you just run out of real estate. You have nowhere to play the game. And so several other tangential problems to this problem is that most of the UIs were implemented like almost like at the very end of each release cycle. So they were like the least polished part of the application. They're implemented inconsistently because we didn't really have like a shared understanding of a design language for the game, apart from the fact that it is white text on a black background. And that there are windows.
You get far with that.
I know you get far, but I think we hit a ceiling. So the past week, what I actually did is I sat down and I went through every single pane and I cleaned it up. And not only that, but I think I've also solved one of the main issues that we have in the UI, which is that there's so many windows in the first place. So one thing you're going to see is you see these hat, upgrade, artifacts, and a broadcast button. So each of these buttons actually used to live in the left sidebar, and this left sidebar actually used to live in the corner over here. And clicking on any of them would open another pane. And so you would click upgrade, and then like an upgrade thing would pop up, and you would have to like interact with it and then close it. Instead of that, the thing now does sub pane. So when you click on one of these buttons, it just opens it up in the same exact modal. Which is pretty neat, I think. If you press the shortcuts, it does the thing as well. I probably need to add like escape or back, or B for back or something over here so that you could just play this part of the game with the keyboard. Like there's range, speed, and whatever else upgrade. I think, let's see. Yeah, it would be cool if like maybe D selected this tab, R selected this tab, S selected this tab. Yeah, I'm pretty proud of the fact that things look more or less consistent and that I'm like reusing components and stuff like that. Yeah, all of this is React. So this front end is React. Yeah, this is WebGL. So that basically kind of alleviates a lot of stress for me. I was previously concerned about the fact that this game is just pane-based. Now it is less so, I think, and I think that's like a better direction to go. Still a lot of unthought through stuff. This is like super subject to change, but I think it's way better than it was. Yeah, it's all TypeScript. Whoa, really?
It's faster.
Yeah, that's cool though. Okay, let's dive into some code. Oh yeah. That first
that was
on
the question I was gonna ask you, with all your stuff. Here's from event emitter.
We have a typed event emitter actually. And it's like typed events.
what the fuck is this class called?
Richard Scott.
Okay, no.
Oh,
So check this out. So we have this thing called Game Manager, which is suspiciously similarly named to a particular other class in a particular other game. Anyway, we have a Game Manager extends event emitter, and what it does is,
What is this guy?
dude, you don't.
There's a lot of functions that have the same names to it.
It's just the same class pasted 3 times. Anyway, so you see this fucking garbage. Do you see this? You have game manager.contracts API, which by the way, also fucking inherits from event emitter, which is really stupid. And like, it's just this like spaghetti, literal spaghetti, figurative literal spaghetti that interconnects the project in all of these like ridiculous ways. This is really annoying. Fuck Zoom, Jesus Christ. Okay, so it was really confusing when I first started working on this project to jump around between like, okay, like what is the life cycle of a button click to do something? It goes from, you know, the UI, the React land, it goes through game UI manager, which is another class. And then it goes through game manager, which is another class. And then it goes through contracts API, which is another class. And then it goes through transactions executor, which is another
About the
class.
abstracts.
Oh, there was even more. So it's like 7 classes you have to go through in order to get from button click to this now has touched the blockchain. And then it like exists on the blockchain and then it has to come all the way back. And the way it comes all the way back is not the same way, but like a different way, which is has slightly fewer hops, but the hops are like fucking go-tos essentially. You know what I mean? Just really bad. And so the way that we started fixing this problem is we have this thing called a mono emitter, and we said no to event emitter. We now have a mono emitter. The mono stands for 1, which means that it emits precisely 1 event, or like it emits on precisely 1 condition. And we've been using that. I think high level, this is really cool because it basically turns in this ephemeral, it turns the go-to into like a thing you can hold in your head. It's like an object now. And not only is it like something you can subscribe to, you can also pass it around, which I'll show you later as well. Anyway.
Something to note as well about mono emitter is, and Justin said that he has a typed event emitter. The problem comes with interrupt, not in you writing your own code, right? Like you writing your own code is completely fine. You have typed event emitter and TypeScript, but I would say 50% of your interrupt developers aren't going to write TypeScript, right? They're going to write JavaScript, right? Whether that's in the browser or in the dev console or they're just writing JavaScript with their plugins, right? They aren't going to have types, so they're still not going to have a type of event. Whereas with the mono emitter pattern here, they're guaranteed to only get the event that they subscribe to because it is named on the class or on the variable that you're subscribing on.
Yeah, so check it out. For example, we have ETH connection, and the naming convention that we've chosen for our event emitters is it's just like name and then there's a $sign at the end of it. And what we do is we expose lots of these little objects that emit on a particular condition throughout our code base, and then you can like pass them around. There, you can find them using like the Chrome DevTools, for example, or Firefox DevTools without having to read anything, and then you can like subscribe to it. And then you can like do whatever the hell you want, you know. Every time the block number increments, now I will have a console.log. And now I didn't save a reference to the unsubscribe, which is really awesome. So I'm just gonna close that. But anyway, so that was an example of how we're using it like at a very low level with like block numbers and balances and stuff. But we also use it, and this is a part of the code base that's kind of gnarly still. Okay, it's very gnarly still, but game objects. We have event emitters for things like, let's see, artifact updated. So every time an artifact is updated, we emit an event with the ID of the artifact. Or like every time the list of my planets is updated, we emit an event. Or anytime I'm like buying credits, I emit true and then false when I finish. This is kind of stupid. This needs to go away. Boom, it's gone. Out of sight, out of mind. The way that this interacts with the rest of the system is through hooks. So we have this file called app hooks. Basically, this is the thing that kind of glues together the game manager part of the application to the React part of the application. And I think there's a lot of work to do here. It's okay, Blaine. Check it out, use artifact. So anytime I want to like display an artifact in the UI, I don't have to think about how to do this. There's like a global context now. There's a use UI manager, actually. I can use that here, use UI manager. So this gets me a reference to an object that has game manager within it, and also various other functions that are useful for the UI and don't exist in the game itself. For example, like which planet you have selected, arguably is mostly like a UI piece of information. It's not like a game manager piece of information. Anyway, so this is pretty convenient. And
That's what I would want to show.
yeah, so one, are you?
Set state hooks require referential stability, and we don't have a planet class. No. Planet class.
It's coming.
So yeah, so the object stays the same, but the things change, the properties change, right? And so React sees that as React set state or use state sees that as the same object. So nothing.
class that they would not think it's the same.
Well, there's some other stuff that we do.
Okay.
But yeah,
We have this in the problem. This is where we use models actually. So it's interesting. Like, I want to hear about this.
yeah, so wrapper is just creating a new object and then it has dot value attached to it. It's a hack.
It's definitely a hack.
So this is in order to make React ignore the change.
To accept the change because of the new, because it's always creating a new wrapper. The value is the planet object that is mutated.
Okay. And but here you don't use a value, you literally fire this thing every second, right?
This is a really, really, really bad example,
Use
but
artifact and use selected planet are both really bad. Because they're just emitting every 1 second.
yeah. This one is more interesting, although it still emits every 1 second, although for a different reason.
Where's the selected planet ID one? That one is more interesting.
Yeah, so check it out. We have built a few hooks that specifically are built for mono emitters.
Yeah.
I'm sure you can understand this code,
Yeah.
so I'm not going to explain it. And then you can kind of just reuse it. These are like neat one-liners. Anyway, so this is like the ugly internals, but the neat thing that you can do as a result. Let's see, what did my Jesus Christ.
Oh, you're just gonna show the.
Yeah, so the API is pretty nice. So check it out. I wrote a new claim planet pane. This is a feature that we're going to add to Dark Forest for the next round. And the way that it took me literally 15 minutes, and it was really awesome because I felt really fucking smart because it only took 15 minutes. But check it out. You use UI manager, then you like use the planet that you want to claim. You use the player. This gives you a reference to the player that is logged into Dark Forest currently. It's updated anytime the Twitter changes or the score changes. So that can be reflected in the UI instantly. This hook basically whenever, oh no, did I close Dark Forest? I guess that's weird. So anytime you switch between two planets, and let's say you were like in the middle of upgrading a planet here, and you switch to another planet, this hook automatically pops all of the frames that you have pushed onto the modal. So like the upgrade, maybe you clicked on another thing that opened another subpane, put that on top. This goes back to the bottommost plate on the stack of plates. And then you just kind of simply write a bunch of if statements and then you get a UI. Pretty neat, pretty fucking neat. Okay, what else is there to show?
Oh, Ivan,
What's up?
can I request, I don't know if this is underneath the scroll, but I would love to hear some notes on like the new CI/CD and deployment stuff that's happened in the last 6 months. Maybe if Blaine and Jake have anything to say about that. And also like, I know we were talking about configurability and modularization. Oh, I see that
Okay.
that is there. Yeah, that's in the bottom half of this note sheet.
Yeah. I will get to that. Let's see. Where's my flow? One thing that we're thinking about, obviously, is like we're trying to build an ecosystem of games, not just Dark Forest or just ZK Dungeon, but also like other games. So that means that there's like shared infrastructure that we're going to use. For example, the gas station network thing, I'm hoping to steal at some point when I have the bandwidth. And Flo and Justin have already stolen our ETH connection class and added their own stuff to it. But in any case, there now exists a dark forest underscore ETH package.json. There is now a dark forest underscore ETH/network, which is a package that encapsulates the networking logic that we use in order to connect our game to the blockchain.
What is the author Brian?
I don't know. I just copy pasted this.
The author is Clowntown Labs. You just need to contact that email address for complaints against humanity, license.
It's because I don't want to talk to anybody. If you email me, I'm not going to respond. So yeah, the idea behind this class is specifically to make it a reusable piece of code that does not know anything about Dark Forest. Of course, it does anyway. For example, it depends on our @Dark Forest ETH/contracts package, which kind of sucks. We should probably change that. But it also, like all of these classes, are completely generic. So for example, ETH connection, let's see, load contract. You allow it allows you to load any contract that you want. And then something that's cool about it is like if the player ends up changing their RPC endpoint while they're playing the game, then this ETH connection keeps a reference. As far, is that the way we implemented it? I forget. Does it still keep a reference?
Yeah, so it reloads, it calls the load or reload all the contract. I don't think this depends on contracts.
You would be surprised.
Because we have contracts API implying it. So.
Yeah, the reason it did that before is because I had the type of transaction as a dependency until I removed it, and I must have forgotten to remove this dependency. But anyway, we should definitely remove that. But it's fully generic. It's got cool stuff like a transaction executor that's definitely not as interesting as the one in ZK Dungeon, but it like does the thing. XDAI API, this is the thing that gets auto gas prices. So now we will never run into the issue of, okay, we will run into the issue, but it'll happen less frequently of people complaining about their transactions not going through because like they have gas price GUI set to 3 and the current gas price is like 20 or something because there's a trillion people playing Dark Forest. Okay, so that's the network package. Something that's like less about code, but this is where my brain lives like a lot, is we use GitHub as like the way, the central point at which we collect like information. So we just have a shit ton of issues. Some of them are bugs, some of them are like feature requests. Occasionally I go through this list and I close a bunch of them because we're never going to implement something or like it's not really a real issue.
Those days I rage.
There's a couple of boards. So we've got Ricky on board, who is Brian's little brother, and we have given him the task of, for example, collecting feature requests from Discord and putting them in here, just like for us to mull over. There's also a bug report project board, which has a lot of bugs, but honestly, they're not awful. I think lots of them are typos, for example. So that's that. Okay, getting to actually Brian's question. This is the last bullet point that I have to discuss, which is DevX scriptability and configurability. How can we make our game accessible for developers? So there have been, I think of all of us, Blaine thinks the most about this because he is a third-party developer and he has to deal with our bullshit. So he kind of comes in every couple of weeks with something or other that like fixes a particular problem that we have. So like one really awesome thing is previously we would have to change lots of parameters in Solidity code in order to have a new round with like new rules. But now we have this sexy darkforest.toml file.
And if you downloaded or if you looked at the public ETH repo, this is committed to the ETH repo, and has all the game
The constants.
constants and game rules in it.
And we stole that too. It's good.
Yeah, this is. So I use this basically for every single PR. I turn this to true. Not anymore, yeah. I turn this to 5,000. This makes the game mine fast, and it also makes the moves go fast. Now we have this dark forest dot network name dot toml thing, which allows you to basically have the game deploy with the network, with the correct toml based on the network that you're deploying to.
I've been checking in that file.
There's a couple other ones.
No, not, I don't think it was by accident at all. I think he purposely just get add dot, or get add dot.
I don't check it into develop. I'm pretty careful about that, but I do check it into my PRs mostly so that.
For Uniswap, I got rid of XY equals K. Zero to ZK checks.
I mean, I'm scared of that every time you PRs. I don't want to disable ZK checks.
I mean, what's the worst that can happen? We'll just revert the PR. It's okay. So another thing that's been really fucking awesome is the fact that our deployment infrastructure involves mostly GitHub actions. I say mostly because one part of it that I'm responsible for that Blaine didn't do is the web server deployment, which still relies on me running a script on my computer, which is really sucky, but it'll get fixed eventually. Maybe we'll even delete the web server. That's what Blaine wants to do.
Let's follow Justin's,
Yeah, you can sleep at night because then it don't break.
I still sleep at night. Not gonna lie.
Oh yeah, like at 2 a.m. when you have to figure it out.
That happens very rarely, and that was actually not even a web server
No, but
problem.
you see-
And the web server actually helps me fix that
Well,
problem.
you said you restarted the web server like 3 times before you figured it out. If you didn't have a web server, you would not have had to restart it.
Here's the thing is I didn't figure it out.
Ah.
I went to bed.
Just called it a day.
yeah, I mean, you didn't talk about all the stuff that the deploy actually does though.
Yeah, I haven't, I'm getting to that. I'm getting to that, but you can talk about it. Sounds like you want to talk about it.
I mean, it does a lot.
It does a lot, yeah.
So it what is it? It starts off by deploying the contracts. Which
Next
on
time.
Extra,
Oh, so it doesn't run tests then.
not the deployment.
Okay.
There's a different.
Oh, there's a
CI
different
that
action.
runs
Okay,
tests.
okay, okay.
But when Ivan, I think it's just you, right? Or I guess Brian maybe as well, pushes to a branch called production, it automatically deploys the contracts to XDAI, transfers those contracts to a cold storage wallet so that nobody can touch them. It checks in all of the new contract addresses to the Git repository, pushes them to GitHub, updates all version numbers in all the packages across the project, publishes the NPM packages that are public, and I guess it commits and pushes all of that to GitHub as well. It has to, we're still on Open Zeppelin, so it pushes the Open Zeppelin file, commits and pushes the Open Zeppelin file, so that we can do so that Ivan can do upgrades if he needs to. And then it also mirrors the client and the ETH directory to GitHub.
Yeah.
So it does all of that on a push to a production branch. And then upgrades, if you push again after it's done a deploy, it'll do everything but deploy the contracts because they're not owned by the deployer.
I cannot do the upgrades anymore.
Yeah. And that's just like a safety thing.
So you guys look at Open Zeppelin Defender, and you could, this could allow you to do that. So what they do is like they keep your like, basically what Open Zeppelin Defender would do in that case is you would submit a transaction to Open Zeppelin Defender, but Open Zeppelin Defender would only queue it. And then now, instead of having a cold storage wallet as the owner, you would have a nose is safe, a multi-sig wallet. But in Open Zeppelin Defender, every single one person that is a signer of of the state would have to approve the upgrade, and it would go through automatically, they would submit it to the chain and do it for you. So like you do an entire, like they have like an API, and then you can just have all those things. It's pretty neat, actually. It's just very expensive. It's $500 per month, but they do like all your contract DevOps for
Do
you.
they even have, do they have Xstack?
Yeah, they have exactly.
Interesting. Are you gonna use it?
Probably, yeah, because I think I don't want to have like, I don't want to do key management for this. I mean, you still do key management, but it's better if it's multi-sig because the multi-sig doesn't have private keys. So
That's true. I do worry about our admin address.
yeah, I think we're gonna switch to OpenZip Defender too.
Yeah,
You guys just keep it like a safe.
it lives in a text file on this computer.
Jeez.
Yeah,
Sometimes Brian puts soup on his computer and almost
I have had to recover keys for Brian multiple times because I actually encrypt them and upload them places. Not gonna say where.
That's very smart.
Let's see. Okay, this is like a poignant example of how Blaine thinks differently from the way that we think. We kind of just write code, and if it works, it works. But like from the perspective of a third-party developer, it doesn't work. So like an example of that is the way that TypeScript does enums is it creates an object. This don't look at this code. There's nothing here for you to see, I guess. Maybe here. I don't know. Where's the good example?
I think just in the body of the commit was, or in the body of the PR.
Yeah.
So that's what TypeScript generates.
This piece of garbage. So if you ever want to like, let's say you're like writing a plugin and you want to iterate over all the types of planets, like swamp planet, whatever, panda planet, you would get this instead, and then you would have to like manually filter out the numbers, and that's really annoying. So instead, we now have a different thing which generates things differently in like a way that makes sense. Thanks to Blaine, not this also, this.
So yeah, so I guess the idea is that you should be able to call just object.values on the planets or the planet level in this example and get 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, right?
Yeah.
And the way we did it is basically nightmarish. TypeScript sucks.
You basically recoded a feature of TypeScript, right?
Kind of. So it uses.
Did you hook into the compiler? Did you
I-
hook into the TypeScript compiler?
No. So it uses well, we allow const enums, but only in the client, not in the packages, right? So if you want to scroll down to the packages, Ivan. So const enums in TypeScript are something they added, I forget when, but they actually go in and replace the values at compile time with the values of the enum. So like in the output code, you'll see like 0, 1, 2, 3. You won't know what they mean, or it'll replace it with strings if you're using a string enum. So here, this is how we re-implemented it.
Before, after.
Did you consider using string enums, like just like 0 equals close to 0?
0 is 0, 1 is 1, 2 is 2.
Or did you want to keep them as numbers?
So you still want them as numbers because that's how they're going to come back from the smart contract, right? So you want to be able to say like, if this planet equals planet dot 0.
Yeah, you want to index the
or
arrays on that.
Yeah, because that's just how the data comes back from the smart contract. Scroll up a little bit. So planet level is actually, so I've used the TypeScript compiler a little bit because if you import planet level, but then you use it as a type, it'll know that it's using the type that you exported versus if you use it as a value, then it'll know that it's the object that you exported. And so we define the abstract type of planet level. It says that's a number.
Hmm.
You
implemented
as
that, yeah.
abstract because it was dot new type or something. I forget what it is called, but so you wrap a number type with planet level. So you're saying like this can be any number, but we're going to act as though we are a new type called planet level. And then every planet level in that object is as the planet level. So you're casting it. And then at the very bottom, you have to use as const so that it knows that that value will never change. And so you can use them not as like a JavaScript record, but instead as like this enumeration object kind of thing. But yeah, it's definitely abusing TypeScript compiler nuances.
Yeah, it looks like super illegal.
It works, it works. I did a bunch of tests, and you can't, so you won't be able to use planet level in place of something else that has numbers. It works well in the system, and I think the diff, if you looked at it, was fairly small, right, Ivan?
Yeah, you just kind of found and replaced. I think previously we were doing stuff like this. This is kind of the same flavor of idea. We wanted to have like a type that is a basic type, but that you can't reassign to another like type that has something that is different from this.
So I found out while working on PR that these don't actually work.
Is it because
they all
all
have
have the same
underscore,
value?
underscore
Yeah,
value.
we need to change that.
So all those need to be converted to that new abstract thing that
Yeah.
I created.
Write down X underscore value.
Oh, God.
But yeah, what's really cool is that this actually made a lot of plugins like way more streamlined, because we can actually, anytime a plugin needs to like have an enumeration of the planet levels, you can just call object.values on it. If you jump to the GitHub, so click like submit. plugin.
Yeah.
And then go to the Git history, go to commits. Where's mine? Right there. So click 120. Yeah. So for example, search for crawl planets. Let's do crawl. So here you can see at the very top, originally it had planet levels defined that way, and then right above it, it was also planet types. Now those planet type and planet level can be imported and used to generate like line 61, or 60, yeah, right there. So object.values on planet level gives you all the levels of the planets. On all of that will now be kept in sync. So if they add, the problem was that in round 05 or in game 05, there was only 7 planet levels. And so none of the plugins were updated to handle planet level 8 or 9 because they all had these values hard coded in them. Now like that will just be kept in sync via these NPM packages.
Plugin dev server, you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So plugin dev server was inspired by Ivan's work on the plugin infrastructure. He had like hot reloading, and the plugins would like reload while you're running the local client. The problem was that I wasn't deving on the local client. I was actually connecting to through the actual game, and I just wanted a dev server that would handle TypeScript, it would handle bundling, and all of that stuff. So I built plugin dev server. What's really cool about plugin dev server, the big problem with Dark Forest plugins is that ES imports, like JavaScript imports, are cached like indefinitely, basically. And so if you import anything in a module and it like needs to be updated, you have to refresh the game, which late in the game and big maps takes really long time to log back in, sometimes 20 minutes. And so what you can do with this plugin dev server is you can add $dev to the thing that you're importing, and that will actually swap out the plugin that you're importing for a it's just like a proxy basically that's appending the timestamp to your import. And so anytime that you rerun your plugin, it will pull down the new version because the timestamp changed.
Nice hack.
Yeah.
You do that by default, like why even have the.
Just because it is weird. If you're doing debugging, it's like a layer of indirection to get to the thing that you're debugging. So I didn't want to do it by default. Additionally, like doing the query strings on it is cool because I can do like later I can do like $dev and hot, right? And so it'll do like hot module reloading in there, and you can just like feature flag, like turn on these things that you want and don't want. And I think that's also important because I want it to work. Like, especially when I was doing the play to earn plugin, I wanted to like dev it, but then when I wanted to test it fully, like the whole bundle and just like just like if somebody would install it, I wanted to delete dev and then have that version. So yeah.
Also, you're allowed to just install NPM modules from the webnet, or like import them from the web.
So a lot of the recommendations in the plugin repo are using Skypack CDN.
Yeah.
Skypack CDN is they like rebundle node modules. They're like a proxy that like rebundles the node module into an ECMAScript module. And so Skypack is just kind of the recommended one that we're using, just because it's real.
Are you using Webpack or something like that?
I don't know. I mean, it's made by the same people that make Snowpack. So Skypack must
Bundling
be,
server.
yeah.
Okay.
Or my bundling server is using ESBuild.
Okay. So that also supports URL imports. never
I
used
wrote
it.
custom. So I wrote custom loader for ESBuild to
Got it.
handle URL imports. A new feature that we just added, actually, that I just added that I was using for another feature that I added is Preact support. So to get Preact to work, and especially to shim all the React libraries that you might want to use, you have to like override a bunch of React namespace. And so I have a new feature behind a feature flag of plugging that service that you can have JSX, Preact, like everything built in. It's pretty nice. I was doing it so that I could test out Apollo in a plugin, like Apollo GraphQL in a plugin.
The trade-off with React is that it doesn't have like that IE6 support or something like that.
Oh, we were talking about this, right? So the reason that plugins recommend Preact, one, I wanted to do it without a build tool originally. So you can actually use like this HTML library, so that's like a template string. But the other reason to use it is because the game uses React. So if we tried to import React, it would actually put 2 runtimes on the page. And two React runtimes explodes everything. Like
Is it
it's
possible
really
to have
bad.
the same runtime as the game?
Or
Or is it really one?
so yes, but I don't trust people to do it right. So you could attach React to window, and then they could like alias React into the scope of their module. You'd have to do like var React capitalized equals window.react.
Yeah.
And I don't think anyone's going to do that correctly. So it's just better to not let them import React and recommend them import React.
I think create React app just imports React into the building scope, and you don't even have to have a React import anymore.
Well, create React app is they're injecting it with Webpack, right? So
Yeah.
they're putting it into the header of every file.
Oh, they're actually
Because
putting it in.
yeah,
Okay.
you need to have like JSX and a couple of other things to render.
I guess
the
JSX
output
is
for
like
running.
React app.
Transpile.
Well, no, once it's transpiled, it turns the JSX calls into react.jsx.
Oh, does
Right,
it need
like,
React DOM or something? Is that what it
Well,
means?
they did away with that. It's now JSX. It's like a new method. But,
Oh, wow, I'm old.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording so that way I can download and upload it. But thanks, Ivan, for doing this. This is really dope. Oh, also one more shout out that I'll give is is Robert there right now?
Yes.
Oh, cool. And I think unfortunately Scott is no longer on the call, but one thing that's really cool to see is just how the DevX has evolved over the last essentially year and a half. At this point, a year ago, we had this wonderful set of Docker containers that had been put together by Robert, and a lot of our dev flow was also through something we called a mock chain, which was a node server that simulated a blockchain. And since then, we've just iterated half a dozen times on the whole build and deploy process for everything. So it's been a cool journey to watch.